Welcome and thanks for joining us for today's HIS Talk webinar, Lock the Windows, Not Just the Door, Why Most Healthcare Breaches Involve Phishing Attacks and How to Prevent Them. It's brought to you by Imprivata. I'm Lori from HIS Talk and I'll be moderating. I have a few housekeeping items to make you aware of before we get started. Attendee phone lines have been muted to prevent background noise. You can use GoToWebinar's questions box in the console to submit questions to our presenters at any time. The presenters will answer your questions during Q&A after the presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded, so you'll receive links to the recording as well as a PDF version of the PowerPoint presentation. We'll hear from two speakers today. First up will be David Ting, co-founder and CTO at Imprivata. Joining David will be Glenn Stanton, who is the Information Security Manager at Yale New Haven Health System. With that, I'll turn it over to you, David.
Great, thank you, Lori. Good afternoon. Today we're going to talk about the threat to healthcare and the war that's being waged on healthcare information. Clearly, in 2014, healthcare had more breaches than any other industries, up by almost 42%. This target remains firmly on the healthcare industry's back because 50% of the global healthcare organizations this year are expected to have a cyber attack of some form. It goes along with the FBI issuing a private industry notice for healthcare that they are going to be the victim of some form of a cyber attack, primarily driven by the desire to obtain patient records. On the black market, patient records account for probably 10 times more than the value of financial records. And as financial organizations tighten up the security around their information, healthcare becomes the next most vulnerable sector. And this has caused us to really rethink, how do we secure healthcare when at the heart of healthcare information are clinicians who still need to access that system and have fast, easy access to the information. So you're at the juncture of trying to secure information, but yet at the same time allowing the right users to gain access to the information. So since we're fighting a battle, it's always useful to look for similarities, and this is probably where I go grasshopper, if you know the enemy, and start with that line. The first thing you need to do is to understand how does the attacker think? How do you need to think? And then how do you build layered defenses? And this is going to be the topic that we will want to talk about today. So if we look at healthcare security, with the set of breaches that we've seen coming up, Anthem, Premier, Blue Cross, etc., CIOs have done the right things. They've secured their perimeters, they've increased password securities, they've educated their users, they've added intrusion detection, they've added malware. They've done everything correct, and yet at the same time, hackers and cyber basically figure out if you tighten up the security around the perimeter, I'm going to go after what is easier to compromise. And everybody knows that at the heart of security are going to be users. And users become your most vulnerable spot. Healthcare is especially difficult to secure. We talked a little bit earlier about how you want to secure the information, but at the same time, you want to create access, fast access for the clinicians. At the heart of healthcare, there are three things that I believe that makes it extremely difficult to secure. One, HIPAA and high-tech regulations mandate security rules that often seem to be at odds with good clinical care, and it creates frustrated users. Multiple passwords, complex password, frequent password changes, all create for more sticky notes, more shared passwords, and passwords that are distributed and shared by many people. The second aspect of to treat patients. They're not part of your security organization. And also by training, healthcare professionals are helpful. They want to be able to help. So when they see a dialog that's from IT asking for help, they're most likely going to respond and answer the question or fill in the form and or give away their credentials. And clearly, everybody says, well, you should train your users to be better at detecting when there's a spoof or when there's a potential security hole. Doctors are not trained to do that, and certainly they don't have the time or the patience. The last piece of what makes healthcare vulnerable is the fact that most healthcare organizations infrastructures are designed to speed access. We have shared desktops, we have logins that have generic accounts, everything that's designed to simplify the access to applications so the doctor or the clinician can gain access rapidly to the information. In a shared workstation environment that are often left out in a public area, there's really no one owner for that machine. So when there's a lack of personal ownership, applications could be left in an open state. They could be, people can spy on it, could install software on it. All these make it extremely difficult for IT organizations to help secure that, to lock down that system. When you start bolting down the system and putting in perimeter security and antivirus, what you're doing is you're technically securing the system so that hackers can't compromise it by going over the wire or by choosing a password or by stealing your machine. We all know that the most vulnerable component of any computer system that's usable by people will be the human operator, who then is your last level of defense. As much as you can make investments, they're no longer the only way that people are attacking systems. Every organization, every CIO I've talked to basically recognize that as the infrastructures become more complex, they put in more infrastructure defenses, but employees, because of their knowledge of passwords, become the last gatekeeper that can defend your system. It only takes an attacker to gain access to one desktop for them to install software that can perpetuate a nightmare of sniffers, Trojans, robots, and any other kind of attacks that you might want to not have to deal with. So the simplest thing in securing these systems is to figure out how can you defend your system from being, your users from being duped into giving away their passwords. And this is basically how attackers today think. They're trying to figure out that the softest, the most easiest place to compromise is going to be your users. And the spate of phishing attacks aimed at users, basically the whole attempt there is to create a situation where the user will give up that password or other kind of information out. You can talk about phishing attacks that can be launched through emails. It could be launched as part of a browser site that somebody clicks onto. Phishing attacks basically try to fool the user into thinking that they're doing something to help somebody else or to enter some piece of information, but at the same time they're giving away information to the wrong user. It's basically duping somebody into giving up a access point. Phishing attacks are broadly distributed. Spear phishing attacks, which are much more targeted, basically is a form of attack based on more reconnaissance, much more information on how to stage the attack to have the maximum impact on either a department, a group of users. And it may not be a blanket attack, it may be targeted, it may be selective to a group of users, but the attack vector is the same. They're trying to create a sense of familiarity with the attackee, with the person being attacked, to say, enter some information based on the information that I just presented. Whaling is even more insidious. It's targeting the C-suite, giving giving out even more information because the privilege level for those users will be even higher. Other forms of attack typically are stolen hardware or lost machines, and presumably, like most CIOs or CISOs, you implemented hardware or disk encryption to protect those machines. And then the last form is really log information that may have critical information, which as the log data from the system is archived or passed, you want to make sure that that information doesn't contain any additional data that can help a hacker compromise the system or even appear like it's a legitimate email. And typically we see people sending out emails on behalf of the IT organization or presenting information about an IT administrator who actually, as part of his auto response from his email, basically says, I'm away, and here's my 2 contact numbers to call. And guess what? Those contact numbers become targets of attacks. And so in order to review, in order for the attacks to work, the more information the hacker has, and the more time they spend on reconnaissance of what your site looks like, what your applications might look like, the more information they can present as part of their attack, and it makes it harder for your users to discern. And as we said earlier, all it takes is a single password that can give away desktop access for that attacker to gain real foothold and launch even deeper attacks. The thing that we will always worry about is so-called zero-day attacks. Zero-day attacks are carefully crafted attacks that are mounted and selectively target certain groups of users. And because they are zero-day attacks, there's no digital signature for them. Your malware detector, void.com doesn't have that signature, and all of a sudden, you are being attacked in a real way, and your users basically now are your last line of defense, and they have to basically say, gee, is this a legitimate dialog box presented by Windows that's asking me for my domain credentials to install a security patch? Is this a legitimate IT note asking me to reset a password to an application? These all become now the responsibility of that user or that clinician, whose job actually is not to be part of your security team, but to treat patients. And so the more responsibility you place on that user to discern a good login, a good dialog box that is a legitimate form from a bad one, the more you're at risk. So how do you understand? So how do you know how to protect yourself? Well, first of all, identify the types of attacks. Identify the kind of behaviors that your employees might be susceptible to, and then understand how to eliminate those. Understanding how you're going to be attacked, understanding where your defenses are, and then understanding how vulnerable your users are. That head of cardiology, the chief cardiologist, his patience level is 0. When he gets a dialog form that asks for his password, he's most likely going to enter it. He has 0 patience. So these are the kinds of things that you need to understand as you formulate how you're going to understand your vulnerabilities. The next thing you want to know is know what your risks are and quantify that risk. A lot of our customers actually mount internal phishing attacks basically as an exercise not only to assess the state of readiness or the security awareness of their employees, they also want to know, are they facing real risks? Frighteningly enough, the CIOs I've spoken to, a lot of them will say that when they mount an internal phishing attack, 15 to 20% or more will enter their credentials into that form without asking IT. 30% of them will click a link, and these numbers are corroborated by the McAfee phishing quiz, where on their site they present a variety of dialogues and web pages, and ask if the user can differentiate whether it's a good dialog or a fake one. And 80% of 16,000 users basically succumb to that, which is kind of frightening. Finance and HR actually, in their test, had the worst margin. But you got to remember the number of passwords that your users have, the probability of people who will enter that data times the number of users will be the probability that will be the number of people that will give away their passwords, and that becomes your vulnerability. So one of the things that we often, people have often asked is, well, how do you do an internal phishing test? How do you mount that test to evaluate the state of readiness? And at this point, I'd like to turn over to Glenn from Yale New Haven Health Systems, who will talk about some of the approaches that he's taken. Glenn?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, David. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about response to email phishing. Just to underscore a lot of what David has said, it's a very common, popular attack. It's very successful, and unfortunately, you can end up spending a lot of money on technology and staff. And unfortunately, this is a human problem, which needs to be addressed at a human level. So I'm going to cover a couple of items: understanding the enemy, education training, proactive phishing tests, some comments about defense and what your response could be following a phishing attack. Next. So let's talk about the enemy first and why they phish. First thing that they might be phishing for is to phish. So to gain some credibility, to gain a footprint, and knowing that somebody may trust somebody else, to use your email system to phish other people. So, for example, they may want to try and use Yale New Haven Health Systems email system to try and get a footprint at Imprivata, knowing that we have this relationship. That could happen. Second one is to spam. So we see this all the while, to try and gain a footprint, to try and send unsolicited emails. So using your email system, which is probably not blacklisted, to try and sell goods, get people to spring for goods that they want to sell. Third one is a little bit more insidious, to try and get into your network, to try and steal your data. This is the one that we're all concerned about. It's the one that will give us a lot of HIPAA fines. It's the one that is the one that we're most concerned about. And finally, to get money. There are ways to directly convert phishing emails into cash quite quickly, and that one's another common one that we've seen. Next. So again, this is a human problem that we've seen, and the best way of defending against human issues is to train the users, is to just keep training the users. We canvassed a large number of organizations when we started looking at doing our proactive phishing tests, and started gaining some information about how they did it, what was successful, what wasn't, etc. One of the things that came across quite clearly is this is a continuous education thing. If you stop doing this, if you stop the education, then unfortunately old habits return quite quickly. So it's one of these things that you have to continue to do once you start. Awareness is absolutely key. You have to take every opportunity to get that message out there. So we do clinical in-services and certainly mention email phishing during those. If we do get a lot of spam or phishing emails, we take the opportunity to send emails to the entire organization saying what we've seen, saying that we've seen this, and people should be very concerned about clicking links or clicking attachments in emails. We're all in healthcare mandated to do annual training, so include it in that. Again, it's one of those things that we know that everybody has to do it, and I think we all know that many people click through it, but it's a good thing to include in your annual training. One of the things is to give them an easy way to report phishing attacks. So a spam mailbox or some way to get in contact with you, and it has to be easy. So what you want to do is foster this culture that you want people to report these. You want to know about them. Do the proactive phishing tests. One of the things that we found was successful was to try and make it personal. So making people understand that that phishing attacks could actually cost them their paycheck, by way of the phishing email allows somebody to get into your network. Once in your network, they could get into your employee self-service system and divert your payroll to a pre-funded credit card or pre-funded debit card. Is one of the ways that these phishers like to act. So again, making it personal, letting them know that this could be about their paycheck and costing them their next paycheck, makes it hit home a little bit more, makes it a little bit more personal. Taking a hint from marketing, so every advertiser selling a product will tell you you need to have a catchphrase or you need to have something in there. The one we use, which was provided to us by a company we spoke to about the phishing, was "Stop, think, don't click the link." And again, every interaction we have with our users contains this little catchphrase. So every email we send out about phishing contains that. Our annual training contains that. Our posters, our flyers, all contain that consistent message. Next. So we've spoken a little bit about proactive phishing tests and how we went about doing this. Firstly, you have to get senior management buy-in from the top. When we first started talking about proactive phishing tests and talking to other organizations, it was a bit of a across the board. Some organizations were saying that their senior management didn't want to do this for various reasons. I would contend that at this point in the evolution, doing proactive phishing tests and the phishing attacks, it's now become too important not to do the proactive tests. It's so prevalent. Most of the recent breaches have been due to or been impacted by phishing. So it's too important not to do it. And again, I think you can provide a lot of supporting evidence to senior management as to why you need to do it. We also managed to get people like the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security to sort of give us some supporting arguments as to that we should do this. So again, that made it quite easy to sell to senior management that we needed to just start doing this and continue doing it. Once you've got that, setting up the campaign is relatively straightforward. There are certainly free tools that can be used to do this. We ended up writing our own Perl scripts. There are off-the-shelf penetration testing tools which will allow you to stage phishing campaigns. And then there's also services that you can buy if you just don't want it to do it yourself or you don't have the resource to do it yourself. One of the things we found, you have to warn your help desk and your email team and your firewall team. Make sure everybody's on board because, well, for various reasons. You don't want them to go into incident response mode, certainly. You also don't want them to give the game away, right? So if you start the phishing campaign, you actually have to train your help desk and email team not to respond to the user to saying, oh, yep, it's our security team doing a proactive phishing test. Word gets around very quickly when you do that, and you'll find your hit rates go down. So what we do is essentially we respond with a very bland, thank you for reporting this. Our security team will investigate. You do want to make that time to respond to these is it real type emails. So I said earlier that you have to provide some easy way of the employees to get back to you and tell you, hey, I received a phishing email. Well, when you start doing your internal proactive phishing tests, you're going to get a lot of emails sent to you saying, is this real? I've just got a phishing email. And of course, the more user education training you get, the more emails you're going to get asking or notifying you of this phishing email. One of the things we always said was we wanted to make sure that everybody who reported the email got a personal response saying thank you very much. Again, it's that positive reinforcement that you're going for to let them know they've done a good thing, they did the right thing, and thank them for doing so. Next. So for us, when our users go through with the or fall for the phish, this is the screen that they saw. Again, we try to make it personal: identity theft, financial loss, mentioning the direct deposit and what could happen. Most people we find remember the cat with the goldfish. So we do follow up with people after our employees after the event and say, okay, you got this email. A lot of people won't remember the email, and most will remember the cat and the fish. Oh yeah, I did click on that. So again, we follow up with them either, mostly by email, but sometimes by actual calling them up as well, particularly if they're also repeat offenders. If they've done it multiple times in the past, they will actually get a phone call from a member of the information security team saying, hey, look, you've fallen for this a couple of times now. Let me take you through how to spot a phishing email. So it's that continual attention. Next. So one of the nice things about doing proactive phishing tests is that it's very measurable. The old adage, you can't manage what you can't measure. This is one of those things that's very, very measurable. We give a couple of metrics here that we collect as far as how many actually went through the full, gave up their username and password, how many just clicked the link, which we get from our proxy servers, how many people actually called the help desk and reported it, how many sent it to the spam email box, how many emailed the security team directly. So we can provide this full report to senior management. So again, part of the getting senior management buy-in to do these sorts of tests is the expectation that you provide some level of feedback and show some level of overall decrease over the campaigns. The results also allow us to target user education and training. So again, if we're doing the in-services, if we find a particular department or a particular group of users who are falling for it, we can target them, and we can target it down to specific users who may, for example, have fallen for it before, users that may have specific privilege who we want to sort of get the message out to. It allows you to prioritize. Okay, next. So what to expect when you start doing this? So phishing is very trivial to do, as David mentioned earlier, and it's highly successful. You can expect certainly double-digit success rates at this. Users will feel tricked the first couple of times through. Some of the feedback that, the initial feedback that we've received has been, you're wasting our time with this. We had a couple of users who told us that we were engaging in entrapment. We had a couple of emails up to CIOs and CISOs and all of the rest. We also did get the negative, now I can't trust IT because they associated us with sending them emails, and of course then we got the next time we need to send out a legitimate email, are our users going to click on the link? So you have to manage through that a little bit. But after all of this, what we found was that you will actually get lots of thank yous and appreciation. When people start to realize that you're doing this to not only protect the organization, protect patient privacy, but also protect their own financial well-being, frankly, they will calm down and thank you for it in the end. And also, once you start talking to them, you get over that initial, oh, you tricked me into this is why we did it. This is what we did. You clicked on the link. By the way, let me take you through the email. And it was very obvious why you shouldn't have clicked that link, most of them calm down and understand why you're doing it, and will turn around to, yeah, you're right, I shouldn't have clicked that link. The other thing you'll expect is that when we started going into this, we felt that we'd get a predominance of non-technical lower pay grades, but it was really across the board. You know, sort of non-technical folks, the reasoning was, yep, you know, they didn't have the skill set. At the higher pay grades, it tended to be I was processing email so quickly that I just, you know, I clicked the link, I wanted it out of my inbox. You know, somebody was asking me to do something, I clicked the link and moved on. So it is a very broad spectrum type attack. One of the things you will expect, of course, is what are you doing to fix this? And the response to that is we're just going to keep doing the proactive phishing tests and the education and training until we drive these numbers down. And unfortunately, that is from the response that I've received from the large corporations who've been doing this for a long time, and the government agencies who get this. Unfortunately, that it really is the only successful way of driving the numbers down, continuous education. Next. So how to handle those angry users? Again, they feel tricked by someone they trusted. Here's a couple of useful phrases that we used after talking to a lot of users. You know, you want to make sure that you come over like, we care. The reason we did this was because we care. We care about your paycheck. We care about our patients. This wasn't something that we're doing maliciously. You know, we weren't out to trick you. We weren't out to trip you up. You know, we also had to make it clear that our results were going to be de-identified. So we did get people who were very concerned that their name would end up on a list somewhere. So again, we sort of reassured them that, hey, look, yeah, you know, our results will be de-identified. And you're not the only one, right? So it's not like one person fell for this. You're unfortunately in a group of many others who fell for this phishing attack, and that calms them down a little bit. If it wasn't us doing this, your ID would have already been compromised. Tends to sort of make them stop and think. If they're not getting it at this point, then you sort of have to start calling out the big guns and sort of say, look, this was fully sanctioned by the body who did sanction it, in our case, the compliance committee. Let them know that senior management did have buy-in to this. And then again, you can try the recent breaches. Everybody's heard of some of the large recent breaches out there. And if you start mentioning the names of the large retailers, etc., they start to get the idea as well. But one of the things that we found is that the vast majority of people turn around positively. I can honestly say we only had one person in our entire organization after phishing 19,000 people who still insisted that we were bad people. So we did actually manage to turn around everyone else as understanding that this was a positive thing. Next. So a couple of defenses that you can start using to address the problem. Obviously, reducing password reliance. And that's what we're talking about today. That's what David's mentioned. I think this is one of these things where you have to look at the ebb and flow across the security industry. I think years ago, people were using RSA tokens, and the little key fobs migrated away from them. And nowadays, it's time to sort of implement a much more user-friendly technology. So we are sort of moving back into that security industry. Use education and training. It's not a technology problem. Again, just have to keep doing it. Proactive phishing is your best defense, or attack is your best defense. And again, doing it is an education in itself. So everybody gets a phishing email once a quarter, even if it's only from us. That way, you know, it's not one of these people that's never seen a phishing email before who clicks on the link and goes through with it. A couple of the other defenses around there: implementing logging, ISA logging in the OWA and the other remote access methods. You need to know where the connections are coming from, and you need that because you need to be able to feed into a CM or other sort of logging system the IP address that the connections are coming from. That will very easily start to show you any connections from either outside of the country or a different state. For us, we're a very regionally based health system. So, yeah, you know what? If we start seeing connections coming in from Florida into our OWA or Germany, then either somebody's on vacation or it's not them. So that's the type of thing that you can look for. Logging outbound URL requests. So again, when somebody clicks on a phishing link, you want to know who else went there. So as part of our response, we do, when we get a phishing report, we do look at who else went there so that we can try and get to them and talk to them and say, hey, you shouldn't have clicked the link. And by the way, did you actually enter your username and password? If you did, we want to reset your password. So we go into that response mode. URL rewriting in emails is certainly a good idea these days. So there's a few services around that do the reputation filtering. So the link that gets clicked on gets funneled to a cloud-based service to see whether that link is likely to be legitimate or not. This one's a good one. Next. One of the things that we should mention is that you have to be aware of those outside the typical perimeter. So it's very easy for us to tell who clicked on a link when they're inside, and we can block that. But what about the user who is either outside at home, if you're in a split tunneling environment, whereby they click on the link and their connection goes directly to the website. You'll never see that through your firewall logs or your proxy logs, or these days many people just clicking on the link on their phone or iPad. Again, if they're outside on 3G connectivity, then again you sort of tend to lose that who that user was. The email URL rewriting helps a little bit in this if the cloud-based system has some form of logging, and you can go to them and sort of say, okay, who did click on the link? But again, you might only know when some of these users who are outside the network, they clicked on the link. You may only know when that ID starts to get used from suspicious locations. So again, that comes back to requiring the additional logging. Next. And finally, so how do you respond to getting a real phishing attack? Well, so again, when we get notified, we look through the email logs, who else received the phishing email, we email them, we call them, we try to get to them. At times, if we can't get to them, we will proactively change their passwords. Again, it's all about getting a very quick, rapid response. Our email team is now pretty adept at pulling offending emails out of inboxes. This takes some time. So again, what we typically do is we will go into this response mode of trying to figure out who else received the phishing email, try and contact them while the email team in parallel is pulling the email out of inboxes. We will have somebody contact the hosting company to get the site removed. Some hosting companies act within minutes. Some hosting companies take days. It's unfortunate that there is that spread, but for the most part, we found that contacting the hosting company, giving them the URL of the phishing site, they will act quite quickly on them. It's their reputation at stake after all. Monitoring from logins from specific locations, specifically those from phished users. So essentially anybody that's gone out and been phished, what you will see quite quickly afterwards is a test of the username and password. Once you see that test come in, and typically it's from a suspicious location, then you can essentially use that to either firewall block it or watch any other attempts coming in, because again that gives you a little bit of intelligence. And then finally, obviously, changing the passwords immediately of those users that have been phished. Very important to sort of lock anybody out of the system. Okay, back to you, David.
Great, thank you, Glenn. That was an excellent discussion on proactive phishing and the kinds of defense mechanisms that you can build. I'm just going to briefly discuss that in our conversations around phishing, preventing phishing attacks and defending against it, what you're really protecting are the AD and application credentials that belong to your users. And if we look at how that's going to be secured, obviously you, from the outside, you have your technical perimeter defenses that you put around your network, your system, your antivirus that you put on your workstations, and your malware defenses. Those are all technical defenses that you can impose. Then when it comes to users, you have training and education, you have proactive testing that basically starts to quantify and also to improve the awareness of your users. Somewhat of an approach that we've taken is to say, if you're really trying to secure and defend those AD and application credentials, then you really have two things that you want to do. One, you want to make sure your users don't know your AD credentials or don't apply those AD credentials in any scenario, whether it's inside the firewall or outside the firewall. And two, you want to make sure that all your application credentials are kept as well in a secure fashion and not manually entered in by the users. And this is where single sign-on and strong authentication has value. So we can quickly, just briefly talk about how single sign-on and authentication management works. In a system that's single sign-on enabled, what you really do is you have an agent that monitors at the desktop level the applications that the user is running, and when it sees a login screen, the single sign-on agent automatically delivers that application credential into it. So your users really don't have to enter in any of their specific credentials. It's all managed by an agent. And if you enabled all the critical applications, then anytime a dialog box or any kind of a form comes up, the user basically immediately knows, gee, this is either I shouldn't have to enter a credential into a form because IT's already taken care of all those through single sign-on, or two, I really don't know my credentials because the system has automatically kept them from me and has automated it, so I don't actually need to remember them. When it comes to the Active Directory account for that initial login, substituting, as Glenn put it, some form of easier to use, token-based or multi-factor authentication now allows you to eliminate even the need for the user to know their AD credential, much less enter it in. So if you take that responsibility away and substitute it for a tap of a proximity card with a PIN or a fingerprint, you've really now taken all the ways that an attacker can compromise the user to give away that password. So there are two things I'd like to leave you with. It's really, when you're considering how to defend your system against phishing attacks, aside from the training, the proactive phishing, which is really to condition the user to be more aware of how to discern or how to gauge when and when not to enter the credentials. The best ways are, one, eliminate the clinician's need to enter any AD credentials and replace that with some form of strong authentication that is easy to use, very convenient, and very quick, so you're not compromising on the efficiency aspect. You're really making it easier for the user to get in, and you're eliminating the possibility that a hacker will even be able to steal that Active Directory account that can then cause a compromise of the desktop. And then the second one is eliminate the need for the clinician to enter any application credentials by automating the delivery and the management of all those credentials so that employees really don't need to know or even need to enter any of those credentials. And we can talk a lot more about additional security that provides for not only system level access, but also application level access. So the way to think about this is single sign-on, which traditionally in systems have always been thought of as being a convenience and a workflow accelerator, when it comes to phishing, it is your last line of defense. And so with that, I'd like to close and basically say, in order to win the battle, you have to basically think through all the possible scenarios and all the vulnerabilities, and then really think through the kinds of layered defenses that's going to allow your users to get the upper hand, and for IT to basically not have to worry about that one of their employees is going to give away the keys to a critical system resource. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Lori.
Thanks, David. Now we'd like to open it up to the audience for questions. As a reminder, please use the questions section on the GoToWebinar panel to submit your questions to David and Glenn. The first question we have is, do the hackers want the actual medical information, or is it just to get at the people's financial information or social security numbers?
All of the above. So it really does depend. So I'm well aware that that other health systems have seen blended attacks. So once the phishing hacker has got in, then essentially they will go on a bit of an exploration as far as what they can get. So if they can get into the employee self-service systems, they will. If they can get into the MR, they will. I mean, they're going to start poking around, and I think the issue with that is that once they start poking around and once they're in the EMR, then it doesn't matter why they're in that EMR. You're still going to have to look at which patients they accessed and do a breach notification to those patients anyway. So, ultimately, their sort of motivation at that point, becomes a little bit moot. But yeah, all of the above. It's very opportunistic.
I was going to say that in talking to a number of CISOs for academic and research hospitals, they've also mentioned that hackers have come in looking for intellectual property, everything from research results to methods and procedures that are used within those hospitals to give them that edge in terms of patient care. So I think it's everything that you've mentioned, Glenn, plus more. It's industrial espionage at its worst.
David, does Imprivata have a plugin tool for the SSO client to help ID suspicious phishing activity?
Well, we have reports today that can give users the ability, or IT administrators the ability to see when single sign-on credentials have been entered. But as I said earlier, if the IT administrator enabled all the critical applications that are used within the hospital and or deploy two-factor authentication for that front primary login to the desktop, it becomes very easy for the users to discern when there's a phishing attack, because a dialog will come up and they'll say, well, one, it should have been single sign-on enabled by my IT administrator, so this can't be a legit form. Two, IT may have taken the steps of making the passwords totally unknown to the user, so I as a user won't even know what passwords to enter because the system takes care of all that. In a world where you don't have passwords at all, or the user doesn't need to remember those passwords, your entire system is so much more secure just by that mere fact of keeping those passwords from the user.
Okay, thanks, David. This one looks like it's for Glenn. How has the testing been received by the clinicians? Do you have any lessons learned or tips you'd like to share for other organizations thinking about doing similar testing?
By the clinicians, so It was a mix. So as I mentioned in the presentation, we did have some irate users just across the board. Some of them were clinicians, others of them were non-clinicians. So it didn't discriminate. Tips for handling them were sort of very much in there. Again, I will say that, and this is somewhat counterintuitive, and you almost hate to sort of say this, but by making it personal, that it could be their payroll that was impacted, tended to be far more impacting than the comments about loss of patient data. That's one of those things that I think people sort of rationalize as, oh, that'll happen to somebody else. Once you make it personal, and you're very much talking about, hey, you gave up your username and password, this is what I could do with it to steal your payroll, then it starts to hit home a little bit more. So I would say that there are other techniques with the clinicians as well about making them aware that if somebody did get into the EMR and started tampering with their patients, it's their own personal credibility on the line. But again, the money and making it personal tends to be the one that gets people.
Okay, thank you. Sam would like to know if the majority of hospitals and medical clinics have taken measures to implement security and data protection services, or if this is still something relatively new.
David, do you want to take that first, and then I'll chime in?
Sure. I think data loss prevention is something that almost all healthcare organizations I've talked to have proactively instituted in a couple ways. One is with their endpoints, they have basically thinned it out and taken the desktop PCs and replaced them within clients, so that the actual data is now stored in server rooms. On the mobile devices that they have, they typically either they will do full disk encryption to make sure that if the machine were to be stolen, the critical data on those machines would be secured. And then the third one is in where mobile devices are used, they institute putting mobile device management systems on it to make sure they can remotely wipe those devices. And then the fourth one is a lot of the organizations are clamping down on cloud file sync and share, so that data doesn't get moved arbitrarily into the cloud that may contain PHI that cannot be monitored or controlled by IT.
So I would say agree with all of that. I think pretty much every healthcare has increased its overall spending and focus on information security. One of the things that I sort of said to our leadership team was, we've done that. We have bought the tools. We have invested heavily in technology. And for me, you can almost say that perhaps this is a view that the technology actually is working, that the hackers are falling back on the human aspect and the phishing attempts now, because that's easier. It's more cost effective for them. But we've made it a lot harder by virtue of DLP, firewalls, intrusion prevention, these sorts of technical controls. So one of the things that I did actually say to our leadership team was, hey, look, you could give me millions of dollars worth of capital and give me more people, but education is the only way to stop the phishing attacks. So investing more and more in technology will bring an incremental benefit, but it won't get you to the end goal. So it has to be a complement of both, really.
What is your opinion on how to best address security with health professionals beyond a BYOD, bring your own device, interoperability, where passwords and personal information are alongside with personal uses outside of work?
Well, I'll hand that one over to you.
Thank you, David. So bring your own device. You spoke about mobile there. I think that healthcare lags behind a lot of other industries quite rightly in the whole bring your own device space, be it bring your own mobile versus bring your own laptop, which are sort of interspersed in the bring your own device acronym. In the mobile world, one of the things that we are doing is we certainly have a complement of an MDM solution to try and wrapper any sorts of medical data. One of the things that we are pushing for more now is to look at any kind of mobile applications and ensure that they don't leave a footprint on the device. What we've found is that for our own devices, clinicians are usually accepting that we can put a mobile device management type solution on it. But for their personal devices, they, regardless of our assurances that we're not spying on them, they feel very uncomfortable loading software. So what we've started to do more is now look at the applications. We've invested in the technology to do the forensics analysis on the applications. We have one right now that we're doing a significant amount of testing on, memory scraping, all of the rest, taking a forensic image before and after the device is used to look and see whether any medical device is left resident on the device itself. So again, that one is one that's heavy in the technology, some stakeholder concurrence, and level setting of expectations. That's probably the best answer I can give.
I think you're right on target. The difference in a BYOD scenario and an IT managed machine is in an IT managed solution, the machine that you're running the application can be trusted from the moment it's handed over to the individual because it has all the safeguards. It has a trusted heritage, if you will, from the moment the box was opened and the IT person imaged it to the moment it was handed to the user. In a BYOD scenario, that machine that's coming into your organization has to be considered compromised from the moment it shows up, and a whole new different strategy and approach has to be taken, where you basically now have to create your own sandbox within what would be otherwise considered a compromised operating system and environment. You don't really know which modules have been changed and what other applications you're going to be running on. So MDM vendors do a lot of work actually to create that sandbox and to ensure the integrity of any of the applications that have to run within that sandbox so that data isn't leaked out into memory, onto the storage device, isn't compromised in the sense of being picked up by a listener or a rogue piece of software that's trying to gain visibility into either the credentials that are used or the data that's being passed between some server and that endpoint. So it's a challenging environment to run in, and I think there are different strategies, and like Glenn pointed out, it takes a lot of work to make sure those applications can be secured even within an MDM.
Great. Thanks for taking the time to answer that last question. Now we really will end the webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you, David and Glenn, for a really interesting and informative presentation. Attendees, a reminder to watch your email for links to the recording of today's webinar as well as the PDF version of the PowerPoint presentation. We look forward to seeing you at our next HIS Talk webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.